Yeah.
All right. Welcome to our first inaugural Trainer's Corner, I'm calling it. We wanted to talk to you today about preparing for July 4th. Have a little bit of a conversation here. Let's see. So welcome everyone. How are y'all doing this morning?
Good.
Doing good.
Nice, good. All right, so 4th of July is just around the corner. We all know. If you're like me, you dread it. I don't like it one bit. Yeah, exactly. And so Emma and I were chatting, and now you all are involved too, about sharing some of our tips and tricks for getting our dogs ready for the 4th of July. Stuff we could share amongst ourselves and with the greater our greater audience. So let's do some introductions really quick, put you all in the spot. So let's see, who wants to start? Ashley, do you want to start? You're in my top left.
Sure. What do I say about
Just
myself?
Tell us who you are, what you've done, maybe who your dogs are, if you've had issues with the 4th.
Yeah, I'm Ashley. I have 4 dogs currently, 2 Danes and 2 shelter bully things. My oldest Great Dane, River, she definitely has a fireworks phobia. So this is something that we have battled with for her entire life. Yeah.
Awesome. Cool, thanks. Emma, do you want to go next?
Sure. Hi, I'm Emma. I have Winston right now, who's almost 14, and I'm lucky in that he has a lot of other quirks, but noise phobia is not one of them. But I do help a lot of clients. You know, we historically talk about 4th of July prep and puppy class, and helping with just noise phobia in general and anxiety. And so that's where I'll come in and chat about how that works.
Awesome. Paul.
Yeah, hi. I'm Paul. I currently have 3 dogs in my household, and my anxiety terrier, Jordy, is the sound sensitive disaster that we always create more systems and management plans and stuff for when it comes to July 4th and pretty much any event that has noise involved.
Yeah, awesome. And I'm Heather, and I don't know if you can see me now or not, but maybe not. And I have 3 dogs at home. One who luckily is, I mean, the aging dog syndrome of being deaf makes it a little easier to deal with the 4th of July. And I do have one dog who doesn't really care, and the other who has some anxiety issues anyway. So I anticipate that it'll be a little rough, but it's not super extreme. So yeah, but I have had dogs in the past who were hard about that. Awesome, thanks. Okay, so I was hoping to hit the high points, and maybe we could just sort of pop back and forth about answering some of these questions, but just, some things I was thinking about is like, what makes this so hard, and what can we do about it? And maybe just a high hits on what you guys do for your dogs for the holidays, and then we can dive deeper into that stuff too. Who wants to jump in?
I'll talk about why it's so hard. Well, some ideas, and then maybe you guys could talk about what your problem solving strategies are, because I like the real life application too.
Yeah,
there's reality and then there's theory, right? And trying to meet the two as best we can. But I think talking about, genetics, right? Some dogs are more fearful of, or animals are more fearful of sound than others. There's some temperamental and genetic aspects of it. Interestingly enough, something like, I'm going to botch this statistic, but 80% of dogs who have separation anxiety have noise phobia, or the other way around. But there's a big correlation, which is that like anxiety piece, right? And then also socialization, and that I feel like if we do it well and we help expose dogs to loud noises, that can really help. Sometimes, it doesn't, but that's a big piece of it. And so socialization or a lack thereof, trauma. I've had dogs come here and get out of the car at the facility, and there's a loud bang from across the way, and that's it. They're done. Right? It really scared them. So, they're little guys. They that lizard brain, fight or flight, freeze, fidget, whenever it takes over. But those are some of my experiences, at least.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think.
Mhm.
Go
Go.
for it. Okay. One thing I definitely add, because we're not just, I think what's unique for fireworks specifically is that we're not just talking about sound, right? We're talking about sudden environmental changes, reverberation. We're also talking about unpredictable sounds, right? So depending on if you live in the city, I know when I was in Seattle and Tacoma, we would get fireworks from every angle too, right? So it's really like there's not a reliable predictive pattern to any of it. And I think that adds to the uniqueness of like fireworks on the 4th of July challenge.
Totally. And the flashes.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. For sure.
Totally. And it's also living in a place where people can buy fireworks for the entire month and then they just set them off whenever they want, is also hard. And it's and having fireworks, even though there's mandates for fireworks that are not supposed to be certain kinds, it doesn't matter. In our region you can get the bombs and all of those things too, so there's not a not a like a guideline for that. And then there's also the piece of like people getting together, right? So it's the like all of a sudden your neighborhood that's been quiet, if you live in a neighborhood, it has everybody in the middle of the street, right? And they're all visiting each other and seeing things, and so that changes too. Or if we and think forward about other big, as Amy Cook called it, boom holidays, it's like the January 1st is also a big one. And I always thought, oh, I'll just escape to the beach, right? That does not work. People like go right out onto the beach and blow more stuff up.
I know. I think Jody has to go into the woods, in the middle of the forest every 4th.
Exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, so I think we're going to dig into this a little bit more, but is there like some high level things that you guys think about what to do about it? I mean, there's not a lot you can do. There's not a lot we can control, right?
So for me, for a long time, I don't know why I had a hang up about medicating my dog. And so for the first several years, we just kind of did the best we could and kind of expected her to just kind of like, okay, this is like the 3rd year in a row. You'll get used to it, but she never did. And so I eventually talked to my vet about it, and they gave us doggy Xanax, and that has made the biggest difference. Is just giving her a little bit of anti-anxiety medication to sort of take the edge off. Typically, the behavior we see was like lots of panting, pacing, trying to hide under places. She's a Great Dane, so places that she definitely could not fit. And once she had the Xanax, there was still, you could tell she was noticing, but she was able to lay down and sort of just pant. And it was a lot more, it was a lot less extreme, I guess, is what I was going for. So medication would be my first step for severely anxious dogs.
That's a good one. I also think that as far as medication is concerned, it's also like matching the severity of the phobia, right? Because, you know, I used rescue remedy with clients for years and with my own dogs, and it's kind of like, no, you know, it's not going to do it. So, but it might for some dogs. But if you just really, your dog has a really severe phobia, or it's not getting better, you know, which, you know, it's not likely to at that intensity, then yeah, definitely getting your vet involved and planning ahead, right? So that, yeah, planning ahead. So,
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, you can't go to them on July 3rd and be like, hey, by the way.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna have an opportunity to talk about that a little more in
Okay.
depth too in a second. That's great. I think one of the things that you know, just in general too, about helping our dogs for the holiday is planning for it, right? Just in big piece is making sure that you have a management strategy in place, a plan for what you're gonna do that day. You know, make sure you're set up. If you've got an internal room in your house, you know, like make sure that's there. You've got your white noise machine, which we'll also talk about, but like that you're planning ahead for that stuff, right? Okay, I'm gonna switch. All right, so let's talk deeper and dig deeper about this idea of management. It always astounds me that people are like, I'm gonna take my puppy to the fireworks show, right? And I often think like, why? I mean, it's interesting to me to go, because you know, you want to take your dog and be involved in everything, right? And so, and us is from our standpoint as dog trainers, we're like, yeah, that definitely should not happen, right?
Interestingly enough, my dog that has a fireworks phobia, I did that to her when she was a puppy. So maybe there's some correlation there.
Perhaps. Yeah, right.
Insight, right?
So, I mean, and if you love fireworks, you know, then figure out what's going to make your dog safe and leave them at home so you can go, you know. But so what options do you guys use, or what have you recommended for people in terms of setting up management at home?
So for Jordy, I'm kind of similar as Ashley was saying for a while. I wasn't opposed to using medication, but his baseline anxiety is so severe that we were having a hard time figuring out anything that would help bring his baseline down. So for the first, I don't know, 5 or 6 years that I had him, I kind of just started embracing the chaos. So we would I don't like fireworks, so my partner and I would make it like a loud movie night. So we'd pick the closest internal room of the house that we could, right? And what that meant is just kind of like, I think we chose like the smallest room with the least amount of windows, and we even covered the windows. And then we brought in a TV or laptop, and we played some really like happy, loud movies for the whole night. We made sure that like Jordy had all of his comfort blankets. If he needed to hide, we would help him hide. Everybody had bones, everybody had Kongs. And I think those were like the biggest things that we just tried to make like self-care blanket fortnight, right, for him.
I love that.
Yeah, I've definitely been there. That's usually the like shut all the windows. Hopefully it's not too hot. Turn on a box fan or two, which creates more noise, and then turn the TV up so you can hear it over the top of the fan, right? And or if not TV, play music, you know. And internal room for sure. I've never had a dog that had to be in a bathtub or the bathroom, but I've heard you know, friends who've had to have that happen, you know, where they you know, where they've set up a bathtub, and you know, which is always an internal you know, an internal room, a bathtub with, you know, blankets and Kongs, and or a closet, you know, where the dog but I like, you know, the idea of having the dog choose where they want to go, right, where they're going to be comfortable, and then just making sure that they can be there.
Totally.
Right. Yeah,
For sure.
Yeah, we often leave all the lights on too, so there's less of a, like Paul was saying, sudden environmental contrast when the flashes go off. I can't remember where I heard that trick, but it definitely helped to just like have all the lights on so there wasn't that like flash of light randomly.
Yeah.
Unpredictability too.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the other thing that I often like really dial up during that time is double barriers and making sure that my dogs go out on leash. Because even though my fence is secure, right? You never know what's going to happen. Like if my dog gets scared, or the front door opens because somebody accidentally came in or came home or whatever, and then my dog sneaks out, I want to make sure that they've got ID on, probably multiple places, make sure that my triple check that my microchip is up to date, my address and contact information, and if I can back it up with taking my dog on leash, not letting them off leash someplace, then I want to make
Absolutely.
sure that that's happening too.
Yeah, and if you have a GPS collar, it would probably be a good time to make sure it was charged and on.
Yeah,
So
totally.
that's a really great thing. So something that I struggled with early on, especially living in this city, where we literally would have nonstop fireworks for 12 hours up in Tacoma, and so but potty breaks, right? So I don't know if this is going to be talked about later on a later
No,
slide.
this is it.
Um, but something that we really struggled with was timing potty breaks when we made this cozy room, and we were like prepared. I think we were hardcore prepared to like hunker down at like 3 p.m. is when they really amped up. And so like, but we would still need a couple of potty breaks, and Jordy being a terrier still had a lot of anxiety or energy and anxiety, but energy. And so would you all, I know what I did, but would you all recommend like long lines, like introducing a long lines, and like how would you time your potty breaks, that type of thing?
Question.
Yeah, that is a really good question. I think for me, I live out in Rochester, so there are also a lot of fireworks. And I don't use slip leads for training, but I do use them in situations like this where there's a potential possibility that my dog could pull out. So sometimes I will have a slip lead on just in case. I don't typically do long lines for her. Not that that's a bad idea, but she's so big. I worry that she could just like pull it out and take off. So we try to do fenced yard and the slip lead just as a precaution.
Yeah, I love that. I think it would depend on my dog, which if I used a long line or not, it's like, so my dog that isn't as anxious, I would feel fine about having a long line. And if I could, get them out, depending on your area and if you can time it, people are going to probably go in and eat after the picnic, right? But before it gets dark, it's like, so make sure that you're like taking your dog out just before it gets dark, it's like, and people are going to start the lower noise stuff and the kids stuff, just around dusk. So making sure that that's done. And then depending on my dog, if I didn't get a potty break or if I knew that they couldn't hold it, because usually their last time out was later at night, then I probably would set an alarm and get up in the middle of the night and let them out again.
I like that.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah. So something I've also done is because I have multiple dogs, but everybody else seems to be fine about fireworks, is I will still take everybody out independently so that if Jordy has a meltdown, it's not affecting the other dogs.
Yes.
Definitely, like I love waiting because that also gives him a time where we can like do some one-on-one time or some training. But I also love the idea of like thinking about how we're timing it and going back to what Ashley said about like the lights, right? Maybe you still do like one last potty outing or a couple while it's still light out. And then that should give you like a nice stretch before you need a break.
Yeah.
Funny, just kind of like genetics part of it. So Jordy being a terrier, he does like to chase things off of the property. So I did a trial real fast, and I only did this because I trust him and we have a good relationship. But at one point I knew that the fireworks just weren't stopping. And so I just let him out, and he screamed his head off right around the yard, screamed his head off at all the fireworks, and then they stopped. And he was so happy, and he was so proud of himself, and he turned around and he just pranced his way back to the door, and he's like, "We're good now."
That's amazing.
That's great.
Right. Sometimes, like, if you have that type of relationship with your dog and you're okay with it, sometimes getting some of that outlet, right? If you need to scream, okay, let's scream for a minute, and then we're gonna go back to our cozy zone, might be okay.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I loved your point about not taking the dogs out together, because, I think we all live and learn this, that the dogs can influence and affect each other, right? And so my first fireworks experience with Wyatt, my young dog, was at the beach, and Rowan had lost all her hearing, who was my major anxiety dog about it. And so Wyatt kind of looked to her, and Rowan wasn't reacting. She was like, okay. Right. Since then, she's a little bit not better, but that non-reaction from the other dogs really helped. But I still wouldn't take them all, and therefore I wouldn't necessarily try and keep them all together or take them out together if one's going to have a big reaction. I love that point. Yeah,
that's like from a physical management standpoint, right?
Right.
So
yeah.
You're worried about taking off or whatever. Yeah.
Right. All right. Well, let's dig deeper into this sort of idea of intervention options. And we all mentioned that like now is not the time to call your vet. Well, maybe now is June 6th, but July 3rd is not the day to call your vet to ask for anxiety meds or, some sort of a pharmaceutical intervention option. But and clearly we are not veterinarians, and we are not suggesting or recommending products. That's got to be something that you work out with your vet. But what things, in general, what have you all used, or what do you know is out there and available to help kind of support the management?
Is this where we recommend products we're not recommending?
Yes.
Big disclaimer. I don't know. Sorry, go ahead, Paul.
Oh, I will say that my favorite product out there. So I've tried different CBD oil with Jordy. It's hit or miss. Sometimes it makes him so relaxed that his reactions are actually stronger, and that can be hard to manage. Sometimes it doesn't do anything. I've tried Rescue Remedy, and I've seen nothing with him. But the thing that did help for him is VetraScience has their Composure Pro, and I will say that is something that has lowered his baseline in these types of situations. Enough to not recommend it, but to totally recommend that as a specific thing.
That's great. Yeah, I haven't tried that. Yeah.
And while we're on supplements, because I'm the queen of supplements, I'm about to try and have ordered the new Purina Calm probiotic product, calming, and so I'm going to try that this next time. So
that has to be onboarded for 6 weeks, I think they recommend.
Got it. Yeah. So I'm starting now, so it's probably won't be in time for the 4th, but I just sort of want to see what kind of an impact we have for actually an agility trial I have coming up in the end of June. So again, too late, but that's okay. And then I've also been, I will look to see how the Composure works, the VetraScience Composure, because I have some of that. I've also used CBD oil to mixed effect. And Rescue Remedy.
I actually had a dog that had a pretty bad reaction to CBD oil. He sort of became aggressive. So I would say definitely talk to your vet before trying that stuff, because I won it in a rescue auction type thing. And so I was like, let's just give everybody CBD oil. What can it hurt? And the dog was like super on edge and growling. And I had never seen that from him
Whoa.
before. So just
Yeah.
something to keep in
Yeah.
mind.
It impacts people.
Yeah, another
where
reason
people
why
don't.
not to try stuff on July 3rd.
Right.
Yes.
Right?
Exactly.
Yeah, I even like if we're talking about like medications or anything, right? Like get enough to do a trial run before the actual time that you need it,
Totally.
Yeah.
right? Because then you can really see what they are in a normal situation and extrapolate if it's actually going to be helpful or not.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And then there's the Emma, do you want to talk about like the pheromone spray and some other medical options you've seen?
Yeah. So I use Adaptil usually, or or a synthetic pheromone spray for like short-term needs, right? And I actually recently I used it where I use it with my dog when we go out in the world. He's not crazy about the car. And as he gets older, he gets a little bit more nervous. And when we go to the vet, stuff like that. And we're remodeling our kitchen, and my dog's having a really hard time with it. And like during the height of it, and my husband goes, don't you have some stuff to give the dog? Right. So it is just kind of a nice, like, general relaxer. It's not a game changer, but I definitely see a difference with that. So that's Adaptil. It's a spray. You can also get a diffuser.
I think they make a collar too.
They make a collar. You have to replace it every month. And what I found over time with clients when I would use it more in the past is that the dog stopped responding or to it. They kind of got desensitized. So that's why I prefer the spray, because then it's just like more, if it's infrequent, it's more potent. If you got really severe, like what Paul's describing, low baseline, high anxiety dog from the get-go, and then you add fireworks to that, no, I'm probably not going to recommend, Adaptil travel
A little spray.
Yeah, not really going to do it, right? And that's, typically where where we go to the vet. And a lot of times vets, if they haven't seen your dog recently, they're going to want to do a physical exam before they're going to prescribe anything. And these days, they used to use acepromazine a lot, which is hopefully not a thing anymore, right?
Still a thing, unfortunately.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. I'm hoping it's decline. If I say this out loud, is it going to make it true, right? More decline. But trazodone is one with Xanax. I haven't had a lot of success in the past with Xanax, and with clients, I noticed that it has more of that. What do they call it? Contraindicated, or the opposite effect, where dogs get just really kind of not so bananas, which is a technical term.
Okay.
With Xanax, but not always. But I did notice that for a while. So trazodone seems to be more helpful. A lot of clients, or a lot of vets, are prescribing gabapentin in conjunction with stuff lately, I've been noticing. So that's definitely a conversation to have with your vet, right? But short term, that's we're talking about short term versus long term things that don't need to build up in their system. And if your dog's already on meds, you can having that conversation with your vet about what can happen in addition to that, if you need some support.
And I would say, if your vet recommends ACE, to potentially get a second opinion. I'll just say that.
Yeah.
What's the one that you put on their gums? I've heard that people have really good experiences with that with noise phobia.
I haven't heard about that one.
Me neither.
It's like a little dot of gel. I think it's possibly Clomicalm.
Oh.
Again, not a veterinarian.
Right.
But I've heard people that have dogs with noise phobias have a really good experience with that. My friend has a severe storm phobia dog.
Wow.
And she gets a little dot of it on her gums, and it makes a world of difference.
I'd be curious about that one.
Yeah.
Have any of you, or do any of you still use or recommend Thunder coats, jackets?
Good question.
I have a bunch of them. I use them. I did not see a very I didn't see any benefit, but I know there are some dogs that benefit greatly from it. So I think it just depends.
I have a low rate of reinforcement history.
Yeah, same.
Yeah. Undershirt. There we go.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know there are some like infographics that have gone around the past couple of years about for dogs that like get something out of those specific pressure points of like how to like wrap a towel around them to target those. I haven't.
T-shirt too, I think it's
A t-shirt,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's that Tellington touch type stuff, right? The pressure points,
Pressure.
ace bandage, you
Mhm.
know, like
Yeah.
acupressure stuff, which is interesting. Yeah, help me remember. I'm gonna talk about that at the end, but yeah. Well, so where should everybody start? What are you guys doing? What are we gonna be doing to prep for the July 4th holiday?
Well, can we talk about what to look for to know if your dog is struggling? Like what kind of
That's great.
behavior might you see? Because I think sometimes it's hard to, if it's not super obvious, it's harder to see.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah. You want to talk about that?
Sure.
Yeah.
So,
Ashley, go.
I mean, the more obvious ones that, like you said, they might seek out like a bathtub. My dog pants a lot, like, and you can tell by her ears, like just the way that they're set on her head that she's worrying. She paces, she like can't settle, so she'll be like pacing around the house, panting. And it's not in a situation where she would be panting, like she hasn't just exercised. She, you know, it's not super hot. She's just panting because of anxiety. A lot of dogs, you might notice like they'll be shaking, so they'll be like sitting still and shaking. Lots of like, if you notice lots of yawns, those lip licks that we always talk about, those kind of things are also an indicator that your dog might be struggling.
I think for me, as like I got Jordy when I was just less experienced with behavior in general, and he screams at noises, right? Like I don't know if it's a good scream or a bad scream, but he screams at noises a lot. But what I noticed is that with fireworks in particular, he would scream to the point where he was hurting himself, right? And so, and it wouldn't be a long going, right? Like they would start, he would scream, then he'd settle down, and maybe they'd start again, he'd scream, he'd settle down, and by like maybe the fourth go around, he would actually be like hurting himself, or he'd hurt his neck. And he'd start like limping around the house, that type of thing. So like behavior that's normal for him totally makes sense, right? But to the extent in which it ended up affecting him and those symptoms were showing up, that is when we started intervention, right?
Totally. Or if you can't interrupt it, like if your dog's barking at fireworks, that's pretty expected. But if they're like hyper fixating, cannot settle, cannot be interrupted, won't take food, then you know you might have a higher level of anxiety.
Right.
Yeah.
And the other thing to add to that, you know, my experience has been, you know, my dogs have always like glued themselves to me and will do the shaking or a barking in reaction to a big boom, right? And the thing that, again, previous, you know, lesser experienced me is like, oh, you got to ignore that stuff. You don't want to quote unquote reinforce it, right? And now, I mean, like, and that doesn't feel good to anyone. And thankfully, science has, you know, told us that is not a thing, you know. So yes, I comfort my dogs. I go to bed
100%.
at like 7 p.m. right? They crawl under the covers and we watch the big, like, and we turn on the radio or I turn up the TV, you know. It's like I do not plan an evening out. This is like early night to bed for me, just so I can hang out with my dogs and help comfort them.
Yeah. And that's one thing we were talking about, you know, management, leaving your dog. I mean, I think that for a majority of dogs, that's probably okay. But there are dogs that have so much anxiety that leaving them alone is pretty dangerous.
Right.
Like I've heard of dogs breaking through windows, jumping off balconies,
chewing through crates,
walls, doors, all of the things. So if your dog has pretty bad anxiety, I would recommend either staying home with them or hiring someone to do so.
Yeah,
Because
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Well, I mean, I always, it's always the hardest time. Like as I age, the more I loathe fireworks
Me
season,
too.
and I once recently had this whole, like, I was like, well, let's escape to the beach for July 4th, talking about the next boom holidays, right? Or not July 4th, for January 1st. And I was like, the new year came and the beach just lit up, and I was like, crap, I
Yeah.
forgot, and it was just like, and I wasn't necessarily prepared for stuff. Like I had my Kongs and my bully sticks and stuff like that, but it was just like, all right, huddle in, turn the music up, just, and everybody hopefully fall asleep, as soon as possible. It was
I
pretty rough.
know.
Yeah.
One thing too, if you have a basement, that
Yeah.
is the gold standard. If you can get down underground where
Yeah.
stuff is muffled, most people don't have access to that, but if you do, you should totally utilize it.
That's great. Yep. In town here in like the Olympia, Tumwater, Lacey area, most of the city is not allowed and people turn each other in. So that's helpful. Out of town, you get a little bit worse, but every city has a fireworks like display on different weeks. So here it's like you got Lake Fair to take into content, thought. You have Tumwaters that happens, and then Lacey does one, and when you're situated in the middle, I get all of them. Right. And so it's like I have to look ahead at it's less about the 4th holiday, although that adds more variety, but then it's the professional big ones that I have to make sure that I know are like, okay, what day is this one scheduled for, which one? It's like, so it's not just the one, we're talking about 4 or 5.
Absolutely.
And then we all have to deal with Fort Lewis too,
Yeah.
and we don't know their
Unrelated, but
schedule necessarily too. So
yeah,
it's tough.
Do
All right.
you? Oh,
No, go ahead.
I was gonna ask because I feel like we're talking about like a level of like severity here, but for people that have little concern, do you all still recommend that they do some sort of like desensitization, things like relaxation protocol, and maybe focusing on noises, or the free work that we do in our chaotic canine class, that type of thing?
Yeah, that's interesting. It's funny. I think I go full management supplement med mode on the 4th myself for my dogs. Because either I have dogs who don't care at all. No, that's not true, actually. Like when I have a young dog and it happens, I'm going to be pulling out all the treats. So I'm going to try the route of desensitization, and counter conditioning. I haven't found it to be super successful, however, necessarily.
I don't know. We don't have time, I'm sure, today, but maybe we could talk again about, like, if you have a new puppy and this is their first boom holiday, what you can do beforehand or during to try to make sure that they don't develop these severe phobias that we're talking about today. And like you said, Emma, some of it's genetic and there's really nothing you can do, but there is that learning aspect of things that you can potentially make a positive impact.
Prevention. And one thing I'll say really quickly here in our closing remarks, just on that same note, is that you can find audio snippets, right?
You can.
Paul always talks about, or maybe I shouldn't say always, but frequently talks about like, sorry, my brain. Exposure doesn't necessarily mean engagement, or I was talking about positive exposure of puppy stuff, not just exposure, like, the difference between taking your puppy to the 4th of July.
Don't do it.
Party.
Doesn't go well.
Right? Versus like having some audio recordings, or sound CDs that you play at a low level. when they're young, and make sure there's treats involved, and associate having a positive experience rather than trauma, right? Because our dogs
Yeah.
remember stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And, maybe there's some tips that, we've talked about doing some social media hits about things. So watch our social media for more kind of tips on getting ready and following up. And yeah, definitely if we can, think about, we have that concept that we don't recommend, called flooding, and you can imagine what that's like, right? We all know what that's like
Yep.
this full immersion, put the
That's
animal
taking your dog
in
to the
place.
fireworks show.
Taking your dog to the fireworks show, right? Yeah. Or like just having them outside watching it all happen, right? That's not necessarily what we would recommend. We're going to look for like the dog to not be showing those stress and anxiety things, Ashley, that you talked about, like the ears back, the shaking, those types of things. And then can we create a positive experience, a positive association for maybe a short amount of time? It's like food happens as soon as every boom happens.
Yeah,
right?
and do it now. Like you said, don't like take them out on, the 1st of July, because sometimes fireworks start then.
Yeah.
Maybe put some YouTube videos on this month and, have the booms predict good things.
Yeah.
Yep.
Totally.
The other thing too, just really quickly, if you can, make sure that you're meeting your dog's needs the week of the 4th of July for sure. Like they're getting the proper amount of exercise and enrichment, and we don't want to just have them already on a baseline stress plus fireworks, because that's when you're going to have a more extreme reaction. So if you can take your dog to do things that they love to do, maybe swimming, something that's like really good for them mentally and physically, that week leading up to it, that would be super helpful usually.
Great. Yep.
Yeah. Good point.
Cool.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks,
Great.
you guys. Thanks for taking the time this morning to do this.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for setting it up.
Yeah. All right.
Listening. Good luck.
Yes. Thank you all. We'll talk to you soon.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.